The bathroom door swung open, and steam curled into the hallway like a ghost escaping. I froze, soap suds sliding down my chest, as Ethan's silhouette filled the frame. He didn't knock, didn't apologize, just stood there, his shadow cutting through the mist like a blade. Brooklyn hummed outside my apartment window, car horns, kids shouting, the distant wail of a siren. I'd moved here 6 months ago, chasing a fresh start after a breakup that left me hollow. The apartment was small, the kind of place where the walls seemed to lean in. But it was mine. Ethan lived next door, the kind of guy who'd nod politely but never linger. Straight, married, ex-Marine, with a handshake that could crush bones. We'd exchanged maybe 10 words in total, mostly about the weather or the landlord's latest screw-up. So why was he here, staring at me through the shower's glass door, his jaw tight and his eyes unreadable? Ethan. My voice cracked, barely audible over the water. I reached for the faucet, shutting it off. The sudden silence was deafening. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there in his faded jeans and leather jacket, hands clenched at his sides. My heart slammed against my ribs. This wasn't right. This wasn't him. I need to talk, he finally said, his voice low, like he was forcing the words out. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. The lock clicked, and my stomach dropped. I grabbed a towel, wrapping it around my waist, water dripping onto the tiles. Can it wait? I asked, trying to sound calm, but my pulse was a drumbeat in my ears. No. He leaned against the sink, his broad shoulders hunching slightly, like he was carrying something heavy. It can't. I'm Julian, by the way, 32, artist, openly gay, and not exactly the type to have unannounced visitors in my bathroom. I paint murals for a living, big, bold pieces that scream color and life, even if my own feels muted sometimes. Ethan's the opposite, quiet, stoic, the kind of guy who'd rather fix a leaky pipe than talk about his feelings. His wife, Sarah, was sweet, always dropping off extra cookies or asking about my work. They seemed happy, the kind of couple you'd see at a barbecue, laughing over beers. So what the hell was this? Ethan, you're freaking me out, I said, clutching the towel tighter. What's going on? He looked at the floor, then at me, his blue eyes catching the dim light. I saw you, he said, almost a whisper. Last week, at the bar on Fulton Street. You were with that guy? My stomach twisted. Last week, I'd been at a dive bar with Marcus, a friend who'd been trying to drag me out of my post-breakup funk. We'd laughed, danced, maybe flirted a little. Nothing serious. But Ethan had been there. I hadn't seen him. Okay, I said slowly. And you looked free. His voice broke on the word, and something in his face shifted, vulnerable, raw, like a crack in a dam. I've never felt that. Not once. I didn't know what to say. The air felt thick, charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. Ethan took a step closer, and I backed up, my bare feet slipping slightly on the wet floor. Ethan, you're married, I said, more to remind myself than him. You've got a life. A good one. He laughed, a bitter sound that didn't suit him. You think you know my life. His eyes searched mine, desperate, like he was drowning and I was the only one who could throw him a line. I've been lying to everyone. To Sarah. To myself. For years. My breath caught. I wanted to ask what he meant, but part of me already knew. I'd seen the way he'd linger sometimes. When he thought I wasn't looking, quick glances in the hallway. A pause when I laughed at one of Sarah's jokes. Small things. Easy to dismiss. Until now. Julian, he said, my name sounding foreign in his mouth, like he'd been practicing it. I don't know how to do this, but I can't keep pretending. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in. I should have told him to leave, to go back to his wife, to figure out whatever this was somewhere else. But I didn't, because his eyes held something I recognized: fear. Yes, but also a hunger for truth, the kind that burns you alive if you bury it. Say it, I whispered, my voice barely audible. Whatever it is, just say it. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Instead, he sank onto the edge of the tub, head in his hands, like the weight of his own silence was crushing him. And in that moment, I knew we were both standing on the edge of something dangerous, something that could unravel everything. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and the memory of Ethan's voice, raw and unsteady, echoing in my head. He'd left after 10 minutes of silence, muttering something about needing time. I didn't push him. What could I say? My own life was a mess of half-finished canvases and late-night doubts. I wasn't ready to be anyone's confessor, especially not my straight neighbors. But Ethan didn't stay away. That evening, he knocked on my door, holding a six-pack of beer like a peace offering. "Can we talk?" he asked, and I let him in, against my better judgment. We sat on my couch, the city's noise filtering through the open window, and he started to unravel. He told me about growing up in a small town in Ohio, where being different wasn't an option, about joining the Marines to prove something to himself, to his father, to a world that expected him to be a certain kind of man, about marrying Sarah because she was kind and safe, and because he thought love was supposed to feel like duty. "I've never told anyone this," he said, staring at the beer in his hand. "But when I saw you at that bar, laughing, being you, it hit me. I've been running from who I am my whole life." I listened, my heart aching for him, but also for Sarah, for the life they'd built on a foundation that was cracking. "What do you want, Ethan?" I asked, my voice gentle but firm. "Because this isn't just about you anymore." He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "I don't know. I just know I can't keep living like this." That night, we talked until the sky turned gray, the beers untouched on the coffee table. I told him about my own journey coming out at 19, the fights with my family, the freedom and the loneliness that came with it. He listened like a man starving, hanging on to every word. And when he left, his hand brushed mine, just for a second, sending a jolt through me that I wasn't ready to name. Over the next week, Ethan became a constant in my life. He'd stop by after work, sometimes with an excuse-borrowed tool, a question about the neighborhood. Other times, he'd just show up, his presence filling my tiny apartment with attention I couldn't ignore. We didn't talk about the shower incident again, but it hung between us, a silent question neither of us was ready to answer. I started noticing things about him, the way his laugh softened when he talked about his childhood dog, the way his hands fidgeted when he was nervous. He was beautiful, in a rough, unpolished way, and I hated myself for thinking it. He was married. He was straight. Or at least, he'd been trying to be. One night, we were on my fire escape, sharing a cigarette under the Brooklyn stars. The city sprawled below us, alive and restless. "What happens if you tell Sarah?" I asked, exhaling smoke into the night. He was quiet for a long time. "I lose everything," he said finally. "Her, my family, the life I've built. But if I don't," he trailed off, his eyes distant, "I lose myself." I wanted to reach for him, to tell him it would be okay, but I didn't. Because the truth was, I was falling for him, and that scared me more than anything. I'd been hurt before, by men who couldn't face their own truths. I wasn't sure I could survive it again. But Ethan wasn't like them. He was trying, in his messy, broken way, to be honest. And that night, as we sat there, the city humming around us, I realized I was willing to wait for him to figure it out even if it broke my heart. The days blurred into a strange rhythm. Ethan would appear at my door, sometimes with a six-pack, sometimes with nothing but a question in his eyes. We'd talk for hours about his time in the Marines, my art, the way Brooklyn felt like a living, breathing thing. But we never crossed the line, never named the thing growing between us. It was like we were both holding our breath, waiting for the other to make a move. One afternoon, I was painting a mural in my living room, a chaotic burst of color inspired by the city's pulse. Ethan showed up, his work boots still dusted with sawdust from the construction site where he worked. "That's incredible," he said, staring at the half-finished piece. His voice was soft, almost reverent. And when I turned to thank him, he was closer than I expected, his breath warm against my cheek. "Julian," he said, and my name in his mouth was a spark. I set down my brush, my hands trembling. "What are we doing?" he asked, his voice raw. "I can't stop thinking about you. About this." I wanted to kiss him. God, I wanted to. But Sarah's face flashed in my mind, her warm smile, the way she'd wave at me from their stoop. "Ethan," I said, stepping back, "you need to figure out what you want before we do anything. You owe her that." He nodded, his jaw tight, but the look in his eyes, part pain, part longing, stayed with me long after he left. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying his words, the way his hand had almost reached for mine. I was falling hard, and it terrified me. I'd built my life on being honest, on living my truth. But Ethan's truth was a minefield, and I wasn't sure I could navigate it without getting hurt. The next day, I ran into Sarah at the corner store. She was buying milk and eggs, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, her smile as bright as ever. "Julian, you should come over for dinner sometime," she said, oblivious to the storm brewing in my chest. "Ethan's been talking about you a lot lately." My heart stopped. "Oh," I managed, my voice tight. "What's he say?" She laughed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Just that you're a good guy, that he likes hanging out with you. It's nice, doesn't open up to many people." I forced a smile, but guilt clawed at me. I wanted to tell her everything, to warn her. But what could I say? That her husband was questioning everything he'd ever known. That I was part of the reason. Instead, I mumbled something about being busy and fled, the weight of her kindness crushing me. That night, Ethan showed up again, his face drawn. I told Sarah I needed space, he said, pacing my living room. "Not everything. Not yet. But," I told her, "I'm struggling." I sat on the couch, my hands clasped to keep them still. How'd she take it? "She cried," he said, his voice breaking. "She thinks it's her fault, that she's not enough." I closed my eyes, the guilt twisting deeper. "Ethan, you have to be honest with her. All the way. She deserves that." "I know," he said, stopping to look at me. "But I'm scared. Julian, I've never felt like this before. Not with her. Not with anyone. It's like I'm waking up for the first time. And it's because of you." His words hit me like a punch. I stood, crossing the room to stand in front of him. "Don't say that unless you mean it," I said, my voice shaking. "Because I can't do halfway. Not with you." For a moment, we just stood there, inches apart, the air electric. Then he reached out, his hand brushing my cheek, and I leaned into it, my resolve crumbling. His touch was tentative, like he was afraid he'd break me or himself. "I mean it," he whispered, and then his lips were on mine, soft and desperate, like he'd been holding back for years. The kiss was over too soon, both of us pulling back, breathless. "I need to do this right," he said, his forehead against mine. "For Sarah. For me. For us." I nodded, my heart racing. "Then do it. But don't make me wait forever." The next week was torture. Ethan was gone most days, working long hours or staying with a friend, giving Sarah space to process. I threw myself into my art, painting until my hands ached, trying to drown out the ache in my chest. I didn't know if he'd come back, if he'd choose me, or if he'd run back to the safety of the life he'd always known. One night, I was sketching on my fire escape when I heard footsteps behind me. Ethan stood there, his eyes red-rimmed, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. "I told her," he said, his voice hoarse. "Everything." My pencil froze. "Everything." He nodded, dropping the bag to the floor. "I told her I'm gay, that I've been lying to her, to myself, for years, and that I'm in love with you." The words hung in the air, heavy and real. I stood, my sketchbook falling to the ground. "Ethan," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "What did she say?" "She's hurt," he said, his eyes glistening. But she said she wants me to be happy, even if it's not with her. I crossed the fire escape, pulling him into a hug. He clung to me, his body shaking, and I realized he was crying. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, holding him tighter. "But I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." We stood there, wrapped in each other, the city's heartbeat echoing our own. For the first time, I let myself believe this could be real, that we could build something honest, something true, even if it came at a cost. The weeks that followed were a blur of hope and heartbreak. Ethan moved out of his apartment, crashing on my couch while he looked for a place of his own. Sarah had asked for time, and he gave it to her, but the guilt still ate at him. I could see it in the way he'd stare out my window, lost in thought, or how he'd flinch when his phone buzzed with a text from her. But there were moments of light, too. We'd walk through Brooklyn at night, sharing stories and silences, our hands brushing as we navigated crowded sidewalks. He was learning to be himself, slowly, like a man stepping into sunlight after years in the dark. And I was learning him his quiet strength, his unexpected humor, the way his eyes lit up when he talked about fixing things, whether it was a broken chair or a broken life. One evening, we ended up at a small jazz club in Williamsburg. The music was loud, the crowd alive, and for a moment, we were just two guys in a sea of strangers. Ethan leaned close, his breath warm against my ear. "I've never done this," he said, a shy smile tugging at his lips. "Just been with someone. Like this." I took his hand under the table, my heart swelling. "You're doing fine," I said, squeezing his fingers. "Better than fine." He smiled, and for the first time, I saw him relax, his shoulders loosening as the music wrapped around us. We danced, awkward at first, then bolder, laughing as we stumbled over each other's feet. It was messy and perfect, and when he kissed me in the middle of the dance floor, I didn't care who saw. But reality wasn't far behind. The next morning, Sarah called. Ethan put her on speaker, his hands shaking as he set the phone on my kitchen counter. "I need to see you," she said, her voice steady but tired. "Both of you." My stomach dropped. Ethan looked at me, his eyes wide with panic. "What do I do?" he whispered, covering the receiver. I took a deep breath. "We face it. Together." We met Sarah at a coffee shop in Park Slope, a neutral space with soft lighting and the hum of conversation. She looked different, thinner, her eyes shadowed, but her posture was straight, resolute. Ethan sat beside me, his knee bouncing under the table, and I resisted the urge to reach for his hand. "I'm not here to fight," Sarah said, stirring her coffee. I need to understand. Why didn't you tell me, Ethan? All those years, and you never said a word." Ethan's voice was barely audible. "I didn't know how. I thought I could fix it, make it go away. I thought I could be what you needed." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. "You should have trusted me. I loved you. I still do, in a way. But this," she gestured at us, her hand trembling. "This hurts." I wanted to disappear, to sink into the floor and let them sort it out. But Sarah turned to me, her gaze sharp but not unkind. "Julian, I don't blame you. I see the way he looks at you. It's different. He's never looked at me like that." "Sarah," I started, but she held up a hand. "Let me finish," she said. "I'm angry, and I'm heartbroken, but I want him to be happy. I want you both to be happy. Just give me time to figure out what that means for me." Ethan reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. I never wanted to hurt you." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I know, but you did." We left the coffee shop in silence, the weight of her words settling over us. Ethan was quiet on the walk home, his hands stuffed in his pockets. "I don't deserve her forgiveness," he said finally, stopping under a street lamp. "Or you." I turned to him, my heart aching. "You don't get to decide that," I said. "You're trying. That's enough for now." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine, And then he pulled me into a hug, his arms tight around me. "I don't know what I'd do without you," he whispered, and I felt the truth of it in my bones. That night, we lay on my couch, the city's glow filtering through the blinds. Ethan traced circles on my palm, his touch gentle but sure. "I want to do this right," he said. "With you. No more hiding." I smiled, my heart full despite the mess. "Then let's do it. One step at a time." We fell asleep like that, tangled together. The future uncertain, but ours to face. And for the first time, I believed we could make it woman, flawed and human, building something real in a city that never stopped moving. Time moved differently after that. Ethan found a small apartment a few blocks away, a studio with creaky floors and a view of the East River. He was starting over, piecing together a life that felt like his own. I helped him move, hauling boxes up narrow stairs, our laughter echoing in the empty space. It felt like a beginning, fragile but real. But the past wasn't done with us. Ethan's family in Ohio stopped calling after he came out to them. His father sent a single text, "You're no son of mine." The words gutted him, and I held him as he cried, his body shaking against mine. "I thought I was ready for this," he said, his voice muffled against my shoulder. "But it hurts." I didn't have answers, only my own stories of loss and healing. I told him about my own family, how my mother took years to come around, how my brother still didn't speak to me. "It gets better," I said, hoping I wasn't lying. "Not perfect, but better." He nodded, wiping his eyes. "I just want to be enough. For you. For myself." "You are," I said, kissing his forehead. "You're more than enough." We started building a routine. Mornings at the diner down the street, where Ethan would steal my fries and I'd tease him about his terrible coffee order. Evenings on my fire escape, where we'd share a beer and talk about everything and nothing. He was opening up, slowly, like a flower after a long winter. And I was falling deeper, my heart tangled in his quiet courage. But Sarah's presence lingered. She'd text Ethan occasionally, asking for practical things: divorce papers, shared belongings. Each message was a reminder of the life he'd left behind. And I could see the guilt in his eyes every time her name lit up his phone. I tried not to let it bother me, but it did. I wanted him to be mine, fully, but I knew he was still grieving. One night, we were at my place, cooking dinner together, pasta with a sauce that was more ambition than skill. Ethan was chopping garlic, his hands steady despite the chaos of our makeshift meal. "I saw Sarah today," he said, not looking up. "She's moving to Chicago." I froze, the wooden spoon in my hand forgotten. "When?" "Next month," he said, setting the knife down. "She got a job offer. A good one." I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "How do you feel about that?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Relieved, I guess. But also sad. She was my best friend, Julian, for a long time." I reached for him, pulling him into a hug. "It's okay to miss her," I said. "It doesn't mean you love me less." He looked at me, his eyes soft. "I do love you. More than I thought I could." The words hit me like a wave, warm and overwhelming. I kissed him, slow and deep, the kitchen fading around us. For the first time, I felt like we were on solid ground, like the future was something we could build together. But life has a way of testing you. A week later, I got a call from a gallery in Manhattan. They wanted to feature my murals in a group show, a big break I'd been chasing for years. The catch: I need to spend a month in upstate New York, working on a new piece for the exhibit. It was an opportunity one couldn't pass up. But the thought of leaving Ethan, just as we were finding our footing, made my chest ache. I told him over dinner, bracing for his reaction. He was quiet for a long moment, then reached for my hand. "Go," he said, his voice steady. "This is your dream. I'm not going anywhere." I searched his eyes, looking for doubt, but all I saw was love. "You sure?" I asked. He smiled, squeezing my hand. "I've waited 35 years to be myself. I can wait a month for you." We spent that night wrapped in each other. The cities hum a quiet backdrop to our promises. I left for upstate the next week, my heart heavy but hopeful. Ethan drove me to the bus station, kissing me goodbye under the fluorescent lights. "Come back to me," he said, his voice low. "Always." I promised. And I meant it. Upstate was a different world, quiet. Green. The kind of place where you could hear your own thoughts. I threw myself into the mural. A massive piece about identity and freedom, inspired by Ethan and the courage it took to rewrite his life. But every night, I'd call him, his voice grounding me across the miles. He'd tell me about his day work. Therapy. The slow process of rebuilding. He was trying, and that was enough. But distance has a way of amplifying doubts. One night, he sounded off. His words clipped. "Sarah called," he said. "She wanted to say goodbye before she leaves." My heart sank. "How was that?" "Hard," he admitted. "She asked if I was happy. I told her I was. But it felt like betraying her all over again." I gripped the phone, my knuckles white. "You're not betraying her by living your truth, Ethan. You're allowed to be happy." "I know," he said, but his voice was heavy. "I just wish it didn't cost so much." I wanted to be there, to hold him, to remind him we were worth it. But all I could do was listen, my heart aching across the distance. "We'll get through this," I said. "Together." The mural took shape, vibrant and raw, a reflection of everything I'd been through with Ethan. The gallery curator loved it, and I got word that the show was generating buzz. It was everything I dreamed of, but all I could think about was getting back to Brooklyn, to him. When I finally returned, Ethan was waiting at the bus station, his smile brighter than I'd ever seen. He pulled me into a hug, his arms strong and sure, and for a moment, the world was perfect. "I missed you," he whispered, his lips brushing my ear. "I missed you too," I said, my voice thick with emotion. We went back to my place, falling into bed, our bodies saying what words couldn't. It was different this time, deeper, more certain, like we'd crossed a threshold we couldn't come back from. But the next morning, reality crept in. Ethan got a call from his sister, the only family member still talking to him. His father was sick, cancer, advanced. "He wants to see me," Ethan said, his face pale. "But I don't know if I can face him." I sat beside him, my hand on his knee. "You don't have to go," I said. "But if you do, I'll be there. Every step." He nodded, his eyes distant. "I need to do this. For me." We drove to Ohio the next weekend. A 6-hour trip filled with tense silences and soft music. Ethan's hometown was small, the kind of place where everyone knew your name and your secrets. His father's house was a modest ranch, the lawn overgrown, the air heavy with the weight of unspoken words. Ethan's father, Tom, was frail, his face lined with pain. He barely looked at me, his eyes fixed on Ethan. "You've changed," he said, his voice rough. "I don't know you anymore." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. "I'm still your son," he said, "but I'm done hiding who I am." Tom's eyes softened, just for a moment, before he looked away. "I don't understand it," he said, "but I don't want to lose you." It wasn't acceptance, not fully, but it was a start. Ethan held his father's hand, tears streaming down his face, and I stood in the doorway, my heart swelling with pride. He was fighting for himself, for us, and it was beautiful. On the drive back, Ethan was quiet, but there was a new lightness to him, like he'd shed a weight he'd carried too long. "Thank you," he said, his hand finding mine, "for being here." "Always," I said, and we drove into the night, the road stretching out before us like a promise. Back in Brooklyn, life settled into a new normal. Ethan's studio became a second home, filled with mismatched furniture and the smell of fresh paint. We spent weekends exploring the city, from Coney Island's boardwalk to quiet bookstores in Greenpoint. Every moment with him felt like a gift, but I couldn't shake the fear that it was temporary, that something would pull him back to the life he'd left. One night, We were at a rooftop bar, the Manhattan skyline glittering across the river. Ethan was laughing, his arm around my shoulders, when a man approached us. "Ethan," he said, his voice sharp with disbelief. It was Mike, an old Marine buddy, his face a mix of shock and judgment. Ethan tensed, his arm dropping. "Mike," he said, his voice steady but guarded. "Been a while." Mike's eyes flicked to me, then back to Ethan. "What's this?" he asked, gesturing at us. "You're with him." Ethan took a deep breath, his hand finding mine under the table. "Yeah," he said. "I am." Mike's face hardened, and he walked away without another word. Ethan's grip on my hand tightened, but he didn't let go. "That's gonna happen," he said, his voice low. "People I thought were friends, they won't get it." I squeezed his hand, my heart aching for him. "You don't need them," I said. "You've got me." He smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. "I know, but it still stings." The gallery show was a week away, and I was a mess of nerves. Ethan was my rock, helping me frame pieces and calming me down when I panicked about the details. The night of the opening, he showed up in a suit, looking so handsome it took my breath away. "You're gonna kill it," he said, kissing me softly. "I'm so proud of you." The show was a success, crowded, loud, with collectors raving about my work. But the best part was Ethan, standing by my side, his presence steady and warm. Afterward, we walked home, the city alive around us. "You did it," he said, pulling me close. "You're incredible." I laughed, my heart full. "We did it," I corrected. "I couldn't have done this without you." He stopped, turning to face me under a street lamp. "Julian," he said, his voice serious, "I want thesis for the long haul. No more running. No more hiding." My breath caught, tears prickling my eyes. "Me too," I said, and we kissed, the world fading away until it was just us, two men in love, standing on a Brooklyn street. But life isn't a fairy tale. A few days later, Ethan got a letter from Sarah's lawyer. The divorce was moving forward, but she was asking for half their savings money Ethan didn't have. He was stressed, working extra shifts to cover legal fees, and I could see the toll it was taking. "I'm failing you," he said one night, his voice heavy with frustration. "I wanted to give you everything, but I'm barely keeping it together." I cupped his face, forcing him to meet my eyes. "You're not failing me," I said. "You're here, fighting for us. That's everything." He leaned into my touch, his eyes closing. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "Stop it," I said, kissing him fiercely. "We deserve each other." We made love that night, slow and tender, every touch a promise. And as we lay there, tangled in the sheets, I knew we'd face whatever came next together. The months that followed were a test of everything we'd built. Ethan's divorce drained him, financially and emotionally, but he kept showing up for me, for himself. We started therapy together, working through the guilt and fear that lingered like shadows. It wasn't easy, but it was honest, and that was enough. One spring morning, we took a trip to the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, the cherry blossoms in full bloom. The air was sweet, the world vibrant, and Ethan looked at peace, his hand warm in mine. "I used to think happiness was something you earned," he said, watching the petals fall. "But with you, it just is." I smiled, my heart swelling. "You're getting sappy," I teased, nudging his shoulder. He laughed, pulling me close. "Maybe, but I mean it. You've changed my life, Julian." I kissed him, soft and slow, the world fading around us. "You changed mine too," I said. "We're in this together." A year later, we moved in together, a small apartment with a view of the skyline. My art was selling, Ethan was promoted at work, and we were building a life, piece by piece. Sarah sent a card from Chicago, wishing us well, and Ethan cried when he read it. But they were good tears, the kind that come with closure. We weren't perfect. We fought. We doubted. We stumbled, but we kept choosing each other. Every day. And one night, as we stood on our new balcony, the city glittering below, Ethan turned to me, his eyes bright. "I want to marry you someday," he said, his voice steady. "If you'll have me." I laughed, tears streaming down my face. "You're stuck with me," I said, pulling him into a kiss. "Forever." The city hummed around us, alive and endless, a witness to our love. We'd started in a moment of chaos, Ethan walking into my shower, his truth spilling out like water. But we'd built something beautiful from it, something true. And as we stood there, wrapped in each other, I knew we'd face whatever came next, hand in hand, hearts open, ready for the life we'd chosen.